All right. Yeah, we're coming along. I'm running slightly behind, so give me another 30 seconds here. What are we on? 45 seconds on the clock? Yeah, we'll be good to go then. Just hold up while I get all my ducks in a row. It's a very special Friday edition of the chat because, well, I wanted to see if you know, chatting on a different day made a difference. So far, the only thing that's made a difference in is my stress level. Now I'm just stressed on a different day. How nice. All right, let's get started.
All right. Just remember what I've taught you.
What the fuck is that?
Hey yo.
Well, isn't this a fine, interesting turn of events? So it's Friday, and here's a writer's chat on a Friday. This is new. We're kind of experimenting a little, mainly just trying to see what days do what, and what days are good, and what days aren't so good, and we're learning as we go. So let's try and give this a shot. For those of you who have no idea what this is, if this is the first time you're hearing this, this is the writer's chat for Friday the 13th of May. Through no fault of my own, I continue to be John Adamus, the writer next door, and friends, writers, dreamers, makers, doers, salsa enthusiasts, cheese makers, basket weavers, dancers, anybody who can stretch and wiggle their toes, people who can really appreciate fine bed linens, people who like hot cocoa, people who really appreciate like a good, strong candy, anybody who's ever had to deal with really just terrible customer service, anybody who's ever tried to change their schedule and kind of worried that it was a huge disaster and a waste of time, and most importantly, the comrades. It is such a pleasure to be here again. Yeah, so far so good in terms of it being just another day and just another chat. But I got to tell you, it does feel a little strange to be doing this on a Friday. But, the only way we're going to find out if, anything's different is if we change things up, right? So here we are, changing things up. I have no ads. I have nothing else to say here other than let's go answer some questions. Question number 1. Why outline at all? I'm doing okay as a pantser. Yeah, I'm sure you're doing okay. I'm sure you're doing okay. I'm sure it's really important for you to identify as a pantser and make sure you know that you're on that hill, and make sure that everybody knows that you're on that hill, and there upon that hill you will die if necessary. And I'm sure you're doing fine. I'm sure just in terms of producing work and writing it down and thinking of something else and writing it down, you're doing just fine. And it would never occur to you, not in a million billion years, to write yourself down any note. I'm sure it would occur to you, it wouldn't even be a thing. You just don't. You just don't realize that, oh God, my writing time is done, so I better leave myself a note to see where I left off, right? You wouldn't do that. You're a pantser. You just step in and write wherever the mood and wind takes you. Yeah, like it's just, this is just how it is. You don't need to write anything down. You don't need notes, right? Right? You just, it forms like a Greek god, perfect in your mind or out of your thigh, and it just sort of emerges out into the world, right? You never had to change a thing or change your mind, right? It's always been that good the entire time, every time. You've never had to double check to make sure that some of the stuff you wrote, 100 plus pages ago is still good. You never thought, oh man, I wrote it once one way, but I better go back and write it a different way. Yeah, I'm sure you're doing just fine as a pantser. Really, I'm sure you're doing just fine. You never wanted to make notes. You never wanted to change anything. You never wanted to be, I don't know, taken seriously as a writer. So you just keep on pantsing. Why you want to outline, why it's so important, isn't even for the idea of like, well, somebody else might have to look at your work, because nobody really takes a look at most of those things. But if you're really trying to give yourself the best leg up, the best move forward, why wouldn't you want to organize your thoughts? Why wouldn't you want to write this stuff down? Why wouldn't you want to do more to help you have an easier time? If your counter argument to this is, well, outline's boring and it's confusing, the minute you write anything down in whatever form, you don't need Roman numerals, you don't need capital letters, make a bullet list, make just a list of things. The minute you do that, you're a plotter, and the whole argument of pantsing and plotting goes away. It just doesn't matter. None of it's a big deal. The people who make pantsing and plotting a big deal, that's the hashtag writing community. And the only reason they're doing that is because they don't really want you to do better. So they'll just keep telling you it's okay to keep doing what you're doing, and somehow, some way, by doing the same thing over and over, you'll just magically get new results. And that's not how any of that stuff works, like ever. So no, you're doing passably well now. You could be doing better. Outlining is the step that will definitely make it better. Don't resist it. Don't assume the worst case scenario. It's not a bad thing to outline, and you and your work deserve better than just the caprice of whenever it is I decide to write a thing, that's how I write a thing. Like, just do better. Everybody deserves that, right? Outline helps everything. If anything, if you're going to ask a question, if you're really going to challenge it, why are you so opposed to outlining? What preconceived notion do you have? What terrible thing do you have in your head that keeps you thinking that outlining will just be the ruination of everything you've made? I would start there. I would honestly really examine that before you dive down any deeper and really, start looking at different modes or types of outlines that make a difference to you. Why are you outline averse? And then I would figure out an outline that works for you. And then I'd go outline your book, and then you'll do better. But don't resist it because you think you're supposed to. Do whatever you got to do to produce the best book you can, including and not limited to writing an outline, making some notes, a blueprint to build the house. It's not that bad. Just do that. When do we do an outline? Before beginning the first draft? Well, I mean, you're going to start the outline before the first draft. I mean, you're going to at least rough out some bits. But at some point throughout the course of writing, you can always go back and adjust the outline or expand the outline or do more with the outline. So you can start it super early, but it's only as done. It's never set in stone. So it's only done when you're done the drafting process. So how do I say this? In most cases, most people don't necessarily need to sit down pre-first draft and map everything out and then stick to that. Sometimes it's enough to outline the first third, the first act, the first half, the first some portion, and get the ball rolling. And write that first half according to that outline, then stop, reassess, outline the next section, and move forward. Absolutely, it evolves. Absolutely, the outline evolves. Because if it didn't, you'd have a really stunted creative process. If it didn't evolve, then whatever the hell you wrote down, that's just how it is. And God help you if you have like a better idea while you're writing, because it's not on the outline, you won't be able to do it. So it's an evolutionary thing that is constantly in flux. But it does need to exist because your ability to write is directly related to your ability to make decisions. And if you are forever just kind of making decisions based on things far outside your control or just whichever way the wind blows, you're doing a disservice to the amount of work you need to do. So outlining makes all the difference in the world. Most times, the only time somebody in publishing, if you're going traditional, is going to ask for your outline is either one, this is book 3 in a trilogy and you got to make sure you really stick the landing, or 2, you come across as somebody who has no earthly idea what it is you're doing, and they want to give you as much hand-holding as possible. The downside there is that they're probably going to lower their sales expectations when they do that. Because if you need that much hand-holding, how ready for publication were you? From a self-publishing side, you can outline till the cows come home. No one really cares. If it helps you, do it, and do it a lot. And that's how we're starting tonight. On to question 2, a grammar question. Are run-on sentences always bad? No, they're not always bad. They are frequently bad. They are frequently a source of problems for some writers. They are frequently a common tool of many writers. But that doesn't universally make them bad. There are very, very few universal bad things in writing. Run-ons are a common issue because there's usually so many of them, just back to back to back all the way through, that you really don't get a real sense to understand what the writer's trying to say. You're too busy trying to figure out the packages of information along the way. So a long sentence makes everything feel a little disjointed, or it gives the wrong weight to things. Oh, well, you stacked this idea in a sentence with these 2 other ideas. They must all be the same. If you didn't mean that, why did you write it that way? The danger with a run-on is that it it serves to obfuscate what you're doing. It muddies the field for you. They're not universally bad. Sometimes, much like fragments, they can be super helpful tools, but it's about knowing when to use them. And you want to use a run-on sentence when you're trying to, just move through a speed of ideas, and all those ideas are more or less the same, or at least in terms of how important they are to the reader's thinking. If it's all sort of the same stuff, it's all similar in some way, shape, or form, and a run-on sentence is going to help you carry those facts forward as well as deliver something of the narrative voice or the context for the scene, then yeah, a run-on sentence can be one of the ways you solve that problem of how do I get this information across. It should not be the only thing you go to when it's time to figure out how to get information across to a reader, but they are super helpful things. I have to tell you, if you do a lot of them back to back, most of the time that just that really expresses to your editor that you haven't really parsed out the clarity of your thought. You know more or less what you want to say, but this is probably not the best presentation for saying it. 90-something% of the time, it's not enough just to split it into 2 sentences and just slap a period down somewhere and, part your sentences left and right. It's often beneficial to rewrite it and think about it in discrete individual sentences that just happen to be next to each other. But no, by default, a run-on sentence is not automatically bad. They're useful. They're tools. Just don't overuse them. Good question. Question number 3, kind of a technical question. What is exchange in dialogue and how does it work? Okay, so we have 2 people talking. You can do this with any number of people, but it's going to be easiest for us to explain it in terms of 2 people, an A and a B person. Hang on, there's a previous question from the last one. Are run-on sentences a good way to show character traits such as anxiety or flightiness of thought? Situationally, yes. Sometimes, depending on how you've written it, a run-on sentence can be useful to kind of deploy flightiness of thought or anxiety. But be careful in using them regularly to indicate that, because it gets old pretty quick. We don't necessarily want it old quick. Do it here and there, do it sporadically, do it with purpose, and it'll be less irritating, it'll be less as a reader reads it, which is really what you're trying to avoid. But it is a good way, not the only way, but a good way to indicate those things. However, if you have a lot of anxiety to show and lots of different flavors of anxiety, and you're not just, beating the one dead horse of this one kind of anxiety, you can't use that for multiple forms of anxiety. it just seems lazy at that point. Like you're trying to squeeze all the round pegs or all the square pegs into the round hole because you're always writing your anxiety through run-ons. You want to really avoid situations where you're looking for wholesale blanket rules. They're very, very rare. So again, a run-on sentence is one way to do it. It may be a good way based in this one context, depending on how you write it, but you might also get the same traction out of a fragment, out of a chain of fragments, out of just regular sentences, out of radial sentences. There's loads of other, constructed grammar tools to help you do that, to show anxiety and show flightiness of thought. Context there, particularly for flightiness of thought and anxiety, context are going to be the king in terms of how the reader picks up on the information. Don't hide behind the sentence construction in order to get the point across. Give it context. Paint the whole picture, and it'll make more sense for the reader. Good questions. Very good questions. Well, we're over here now with exchange and dialogue, and we're going to need two people, an A and a B. And it doesn't matter what we're talking about, and it doesn't matter how many words each person is talking. Exchange is the idea that during a conversation, when two people are going back and forth, or three, or five, or whatever, when the meat of conversation is lobbing back and forth between however many people, the exchange is when, in the course of describing whatever the hell you're describing, part of that exchange is not just feeling. A tells B, you're a pain in the ass. B tells A, well, it takes one to know one. But there's also information given that was not necessarily intended to be given. Exchange in dialogue is where people, through their communicating, gain more than just the ability to tick the box and say, yes, I communicated with them. It's an exchange of information. It's an exchange of ideas. It's an exchange of feelings. It's an exchange of mood. It's an exchange of power dynamic, depending on how you want to write it. Exchange in dialogue just means that because of the dialogue, because of the fact that characters are talking to each other, because dialogue is happening, some things, and there's almost always more than one, some things are swapped between them. Information, emotion, mood, tone. Those are the big four: information, mood, tone. Atmospheric and other stuff, reactions and beats are in there. But by and large, it's the idea that as you and I are talking, because we are not, sitting here reading our script with our heads down off the page, there's a naturalness to it that is allowing for an interchange of ideas. We're going back and forth. We're listening to one another, presumably. And as a result, we are gaining feelings and more information coming to each person from the other person. That's the point of exchange. It's there to give your dialogue back and forth a little bit of flexibility and fluidity, so that it's not just, here is the plot information. Oh, thank you for the plot information. Yes, you're very welcome for the plot information. Here is more plot information. Oh, thank you so much for the plot. We want to get away from that, right? We want to do like way better than that. So we use stuff like exchange to make sure our characters, when they do talk, for whatever reason they're talking to each other about, they're at least making a difference with each other, and there's something is being expressed beyond just plot. That's exchange. Good stuff. Are there any questions from anybody that's here? Also, hello, hi. I forgot to say hello to you when we started. I apologize. I'm going to lean over while this is on a non-camera screen and turn up the light so that I look less awful. But if you have questions, fire away. Else we will just keep moving. There we go. All right. Now, there was a question. Where's my... When can I use sentence fragments in fiction? Yes, you can use them everywhere. You can use them all. You can use them all the time. When do I use them? Whenever you want to. Can you give us an example? Sure. Let Let's see. Let me think of one off the top of my head. John sat in his office most of the day, wondering what it was he would do tonight. He thought. He sat. Bored. There's your fragment. What's the benefit of that? It just helps add some color. You could also use it to describe action. Person A punches person B, crunch. The onomatopoeia of fist hitting face. That's a fragment. There's loads of utility to fragments. They can help pick up pacing and speed things along because all of a sudden, because a fragment is generally shorter to read than a full sentence. So you're giving the reader a little bit of a boost. But you can use fragments to serve a lot of different fill-in-the-blank roles. Oh, I need to add more depth to a scene. Oh, I need to make the dialogue feel more people-y, like it sounds like a person talking. I need to create a sense of tension. I need to describe more things accurately given my narrator's voice. Sentence fragments, super helpful, super useful. You can use them all over the place for loads of different reasons. Good question. Very good question. Are there any others? Else we will march on. Let's march. So question 4. I want to build some momentum as a writer, which is fantastic, and you totally should. You should always aim to build momentum as a writer. Oh, excuse me. What should I avoid when I start writing? Should I avoid things like epic plots, MPOV, first person, etc.? Okay. On one hand, you technically, the best kind of accuracy, you technically don't have to avoid anything when you get started. It could be your debut novel, and you could knock it out of the park with multiple points of view in first person with a big-ass plot. You totally could. I could also one day go outside and shoot 100 free throws without missing. It is statistically possible. But if you're just starting out, despite all the interest or planning or daydreaming or fantasizing or dicking around that you may have done about how great it's going to be to write this big, giant epic, this major, huge story that you've been thinking about for years and years and years, you want to try and produce this thing. And making that conversion from the wild fantasy that it has been for you, the sense of like, oh my God, I'm so into these characters. I know all these things. It's going to be this. It's going to be that. Sure. That's okay. It can be those things. But making that transition from the thing that lives in your brain to the thing that lives on the page, you want to try and do that in a way that's productive, which means you're going to have to narrow down some of the weird, strange, crazy indecision you've got in your head that keeps it a fantasy, and make some concrete choices about what it really can be, so that, much like how you enjoy it, somebody else gets a chance to enjoy it as well. So honestly, if you are just starting out, keeping it somewhat simple is really, really, really a good idea. Now, how do you determine simple? Well, that's up to you, but I can tell you that trying to juggle something like 6 points of view and having multiple interweaving plots and really trying to like reinvent the wheel when it comes to, I don't know, whatever person you're writing in, those are nice things. And when they work, they're amazing and everybody talks about it. But if you're not dead certain that you can either get better at it or do it well enough from the jump, you don't gain anything from doing it this way. You don't get a bigger advance. You don't automatically get more sales just because you wrote in second person. Like it doesn't work that way. Keep the story simple, not necessarily plot, but the reader's path to interface with the story. How many narrating characters do you have? What tense is it written in? Where does the story begin? How does it build and how does it end? You can simplify those things down, and it doesn't render the story automatically like childish or juvenile or something. You just don't need to go out of your way and be like, I have an 11-book series and there are 14 different point of view characters and, there's a massive 3-layer of plot. And no, don't do that. That's, in part one, that's really difficult, and I wouldn't expect anybody who's just getting started to do that. And two, if you really do it poorly, it's going to be real noticeable. That's the downside in taking those big risks to really produce the transcendent thing. Yeah, you can knock it out of the park and really do great and have it be this huge thing, but at the same time, if you mess it up, oh boy howdy, you really messed up. And you don't have to live out on the extremes of I have to tell a see Dick run Dick run story versus I have to go tell this hyper complicated genie, super generational mega story. No, there's a whole range of stories from the simplest to the most complex, and you can live anywhere in that space. Honestly, truly, on a Friday afternoon, backed up against the wall, the best thing I can tell you to do is simplify your number of narrating characters, simplify the number of points of view you have, and figure out what your plot is and what your plot isn't. Following those two things will streamline and fix a lot of problems for you down the road. Now, whether you turn that into multiple point of view or whether you turn it into some big crazy plot Rube Goldberg machine, that's up to you. But if you narrow down on the number of point of view characters and you create some kind of simple to understand but possibly complex in how it plays out, but simple to understand plot, the reader, whomever they might be, will engage with it far easier than if they need to break out a decoder ring and keep a scratch pad next to them reading to figure out who's doing the talking and what their plot is. Simplicity here really matters. It also gives you a chance to really develop your tools. You get really good at writing in a character's voice if you have to constantly keep writing in that character's voice. If you want to get better at writing action scenes, you write action scenes. That doesn't mean you constantly engineer an action scene for everything, but as it arises in the story, you play to your strengths. So keep it simple, and you'll do far better than if you start from the intention of oh no, I'm going to show everybody how good I am. Yeah, great. I'm happy for you. But if you're writing a check that your craft can't cash, you'll be exposed. You'll see that in rejections. You'll see it in the speed of rejection. You'll see it in the lack of sales. You'll see it in poor reviews. Nail your basics, and it goes a long way. Really, it doesn't mean you're a bad writer. Just nail your basics. Learn the fundamentals and do them really, really well, and it makes a huge difference. Good question. Question 5. Is it bad to start chapter 1 with a dream sequence? It's not bad. It is sometimes, in some contexts, a little lazy. And in some contexts, not terribly creative. It can feel a lot like, ho-hum, we've seen this all before. But it is not automatically bad. Just like run-on sentences weren't automatically the worst thing ever. You can start chapter 1 with a dream sequence. It's a little tired, though. It's a little dull. We've all seen this before. It's not wrong to do, but remember, if we've all seen this before, the reader's going to set this expectation of it's a dream sequence. I've seen it before. Okay, ho-hum. Then you've got to do some amount of extra work creatively, narratively, developmentally to get them past that expectation. And essentially, you've got to lift yourself out of a hole of your own design. You didn't mean the dream sequence at the beginning of the book to be this boring, god-awful torture fest, but the reader set that expectation. And if you wrote a boring as hell dream sequence because you're into it, but you wrote it real flat and it's dead on the page, then you're only confirming the reader's expectation, and you're going to have to work 10 times harder on the next couple pages to win them over before they set the next expectation that you haven't really done anything worth their reading. So it's not bad to start a chapter with a dream sequence. It can be lazy. it can be distancing because there's always that moment after the dream is done. The dream can be really active. This is a real common problem with dream sequences. Dream sequence is crazy and psychedelic and active, and there's a ton of stuff going on, and then all of a sudden you get to that moment where the character like sits bolt upright in bed, clutching their chest and gasping, and it invalidates all the action beats and all the setup you did because the dream isn't technically real. I mean, I'm not talking like a Nolan Inception level dream is reality thing. I mean like this fantastic quality within the story that you character had a very active dream. They slept laying down, one presumes. So you've reset the reader's understanding of things. So it's hard to imply that the inactive person who just woke up clutching their chest, oh my God, is also the same active person they are in a dream. Again, it's not bad or wrong, but it can be a thing that you're using to make a story harder on yourself. Like, it's not a bad look, but the number of chances where it really works is a lot smaller than you think. It's often a better choice just to start an exposition and roll the story out. But you can go with a dream sequence. It's not the end of the world. Just really make that wake up moment when the dream ends and real life of the story resumes. Make it really clear and really dynamic. Don't just have them wake up with a start, gasping, because I will sprain something if I have to roll my eyes any harder at that idea. Not everybody needs to wake up with a start, gasping, sweaty and amazed. Like, just no. Do better than that. Do so much better than that. Everybody deserves better. Everybody wants better. So be careful when you start your chapter 1 with a dream sequence. Okay? Question 6. Oh man, there's like a little novel here. Gentle advice. I just lost my job, and I want to transition to writing as a side gig while I figure out what I want to do next. What do I need to know, and how do I get started? Okay, here we go. You're going to need to know that as a side gig, this is really time intensive. And if you're looking for a side gig to put money in your pocket faster, I would strongly recommend getting into sales copy or nonfiction writing as opposed to just straight up fiction, because at least when it's sales copy or basic content farming, those deadlines and those paychecks come a little faster, come a little easier. They do have a downside, though. You're going to be tasked with needing discipline. You know, you're going to have to write X number of words on the clock in a hurry, and that's not everybody's great strength. Some people thrive with it. I can do it, but I don't do it very well anymore. It's been a long time. But for some people, it's like totally the bee's knees, which is fine. And if that's you, great, good job. But in terms of I want to get into fiction as a side gig, there's a lot of hurry up and wait here. No matter how you're going to publish this sucker, it's going to take time to write the book. It's going to take time to outline the book. It's going to take time to think about the book. It's going to take time to figure out the scenes. It's going to take time to put your fingers on the keys and write page after page and scene after scene. It's going to take time to revise that thing or polish it. It's going to take time to put together a query letter and a synopsis and send that out. Then you're going to be waiting for publishers or agents or pimps or whomever to turn around and really engage with it. And if you self-publish it, well, you still got to wait for a cover. You still probably want to get that edited. There's always time. And then you're going to put it out into the world one way or the other. And then you're hurrying up and you're waiting now for people to buy the thing and buy the thing to the degree where you get the money you want. That took some time. That's important to know up front, because I don't want to make you not write, but I need you to know that if you're trying to be like, man, I got to pay the rent in 2 weeks. What am I going to do, John? Writing a novel will not pay your rent in 2 weeks. But if that's okay, and we're not looking to solve, a financial issue with a creative solution, if we're just looking to produce work, which is great, excellent, then what you need to know is that writing is the act of making decisions. And you can get started as simply as just writing down thoughts, notes, ideas, fragments of scenes, pieces of characters, and just dumping them all into one big file. or one big legal pad or one giant document or one big note, whatever. Write down all the stuff. And when things start to form, because you're going to hit the ground running with this initial surge of excitement. Oh my God, I'm writing. This is so fun. And that's good. But that surge is going to burn out, as all surges do. It's not meant to go forever. And that's where you need discipline and organization to kind of pick the ball up and keep it going. Because eventually, as B.B. King says, the thrill is gone. And it turns into a job. And it takes time. And you got to be able to sit there and go, okay, well, I'm gonna work on this thing a piece at a time. Writing is the act of making decisions. So the first thing you want to do is dump into some holding pen, whether that's a file or a notebook or a journal or whatever. But you want to get all your ideas out. We haven't even drafted yet, but get all your ideas out. Bits and pieces, big chunks, little things, whatever it might be. Get those ideas out. And then start shaping things. Build a character. Figure out a plot. And start dialing in on the concrete of the story triangle. And then start outlining a handful of scenes. And then chain that together over and over until you get to a first draft. There's no number. There's no like, this should take you 4 days. It takes you as long as it takes. You do with it whatever you need to do. But the better organized you can roll with from the jump, the more organization you can do and then go forward, this gets so much easier when it just becomes a day-by-day, tick-the-box kind of practice of I'm sitting down and writing. I'm going to write this, and then tomorrow I'm going to write that, or whatever the schedule might be. But the better organized you can be up front, simplifies so many issues. Get all the ideas out, start finding, organizing them and clustering them into groups, start scratching out little ideas here and there, expand on a few things, and then see what pieces you can attach to one another, work on your story triangle, develop your scenes, develop some characters, start putting together a first draft. It's going to be messy. It's going to be garbagey. You're going to swear up and down you can write better, and you will. You will end up writing a second draft that's way better than your first. But you want to get started by just getting all the ideas out. And then it's not a sprint. It's not even at this point a marathon. It's more of an exploration. You're trying to get your ideas out. You're trying to get your ideas across. It doesn't need to be this big, complicated thing. Just get in the habit of emptying your brain onto a page and then go from there. That's how I'd get started. Do we have any more questions? I see a whole pile of people came in. Hello, it's good to see you all. It's nice to have you here. Questions, issues, comments, thoughts? Else we will march on. As soon as I look down and see why my phone is going nuts at me. All right, we'll deal with that. Okay. Even on a Friday, when I'm in the middle of a thing, there's always somebody who's got to email me or text me or whatever. Like right this second, something not actually urgent. No matter what. It's like people know, oh, John's turned on the microphone. Either get a landscaper out here to mow a lawn right by this window, or immediately start talking to me about a work thing that can super wait. Okay. I apologize for the delay. Let's march on. Oof. Question 7. How can you say my art is political if I don't write any politics or bring up social topics? That's a great question. And I'm happy to tell you that whatever you're writing reveals something about you. And by extension, that's political. When we talk about art being political, or when we talk about art being revolutionary, we're not talking about it in terms of it representing a particular party or a particular affiliation with some kind of iconography or something. Because parties are stupid, and that whole system is stupid, and it has nothing to do with writing a book. They are independently stupid of this process. But how you write, whatever it is you write, reveals something about you. So if you're writing, let's suppose, just hypothetically, let's suppose you're writing a hetero romance, male and female protagonistic characters, and maybe they maybe it's a cheating story. Maybe it's somebody leaving their marriage to go hook up with somebody else. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. It'll sell real well. But what that suggests and how you frame cheating says a lot about what you feel marriage is and marriage isn't, and what cheating is and what cheating isn't, and how you frame that story. Likewise, if you have, if you're writing science fiction or something, and you have races and species of creatures that are very clearly analogous to some of the more offensive human existence tropes. You've written gnomes to be very Semitic. You've written dwarves to be Scottish for some reason. Something like that. That speaks to your worldview. Even if you never write the sentence in the book, I, author name here, feel the following things. How you choose to lay out the story says a lot about how you perceive story, which says a lot about how you feel about things. And when people start thinking about this, they're like, oh, no. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to mix it up. I'm going to intentionally write something very different from me. Yeah. That still reveals something about you, too, because it still says you're trying not to be spotted. It doesn't matter if you never mention the word Democrat or the word Republican. It doesn't matter if you never mention the GOP or something. It doesn't matter if you never talk about, like, the patriarchy or effective rights for all humans, or how housing should be free on planet Earth. Even if you never bring up anything like that, your thoughts on just how life is, how life could be, how life shouldn't be, how life was, are all going to come across in how you idealize, fantasize, declare, avoid, write, restate, describe, develop, whatever you're writing. Your politics as a human being, because you are a creator of whatever the hell it is you're creating, will come through. It might not be political party affiliation, but it's at least in terms of like, oh, you believe in this, this, and this. You have this view on these social topics. You have this view of the social contract. You have this view on this institution, or this view on that history thing. Because of how you wrote about it, or how you tried to avoid writing about it with whatever you were writing on. Like, it's unavoidable to get political. You don't have to race for it. You don't have to, rise up with the rest of the comrades and suddenly, put your radical hat on. It'd be awesome if you did. I think more people should, and I think more people should do it fearlessly. But yeah, everything you create, no matter what it is, whether it's brownies at the bake sale, or draft number 2, or that sex scene, or the action scene on the boat, it all reveals some level of your beliefs and faith and thinking and feeling and politics. It's worth it to dig into what you really believe and what you really feel, and see if that helps strengthen your voice, rather than just kind of pretend it's not really there, or pretend it's not really a big deal and give some kind of superficial thing because you just can't be bothered. I don't want to do that. Yeah, you should do that. Don't be afraid of it, because it's a part of you, and it should be, brought out and put forward in your writing. So that's why I can say art is political, because all art is political. From the terrible, terrible pizza I tried to cook tonight for dinner, it was awful. It was just a mess. It sucked so hard. And my frustration with it all the way out to, hey, I think housing should be free on planet Earth, and we can just print money because money's fake. There are some of my politics. But yeah, everything you do is political. Just roll with it. On we go. Question 8. I love this question. I love this question so much. Question 8. What's the difference between a developmental editor and whatever kind of editor people say they are on Twitter? Oh boy. Well, we came out swinging, didn't we? All right. So most of the time when people talk about being an editor in the hashtag writing community, they're somewhere in the ballpark of copy and line editing. So they're going to look for spelling. They're going to look for typos. They're going to look for grammar. They're going to double check and make sure your names for characters are consistent and that things more or less in some way, shape, or form make some sense. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a critical step in the process. It's a good level to work out. Loads of people do it. It's a great way to make a career. You can get by being a line and copy editor. No problem. You can pay some bills. It'll be nice. But that's different than a developmental editor, because a developmental editor takes that and goes deeper, goes further. I'm trying to find a gesture. They do more with it, because it isn't just make sure your names are right, make sure your comma's in the right place, make sure you've spelled, all 6 different versions of Susan, Susie, and Sue distinguishably enough separate. But a developmental editor is also going to ask you, hey, what's this character's plot? What's this arc? Why is this scene here? What's happening with the dog? What's going on? And they're not doing it because they're dumb or something. It's interrogating not just the polish of a thing, but also the reason why it's here. Why did you write this? What are you trying to say? How does this, whatever it is that isn't working, how is it supposed to fit with these other things? Or how are these other things supposed to be tailored or adjusted to fit over there? A developmental editor works at a more rigorous, detailed level than the other kinds of editors. That's not to say they're wrong, but it's the difference between, say, going to somebody who will detail the inside of your car versus somebody who will take apart and service the entire engine. Yeah, they both work in cars, but they have 2 very different functions and can both perform them perfectly well, but they do totally different things. The developmental editor has more work to do, has a generally tougher pile of work to do, because it so often boils down to a really conceptual set of questions. What are you trying to say here? What's this character represent? How does what themes are here? How does this, not just be a good story, but also how does this turn into a good product? How does this turn into a thing that you can build further writing craft on? Like, this is the ground floor of the condo complex that is your creative career. I'm trying to build you a good ground floor so you can only go up from here. The developmental editor, moves on a tougher track. I do wish more people, if they're going to go out there and hang their shingle and I'm an editor, what kind? That'd be super helpful. Not just for me, but for writers too. What kind of editor are you? What do you want to do? What don't you want to do? I, for instance, really, really, really hate proofreading. I'm terrible at it. I can do it. I have done it before to pay the bills, but I don't like it. I don't like it as much as, somebody handing me a couple pages and going, fix this. Why isn't it working? And I take it apart and I tell you, oh, it's not working because of 1, 2, 3 things, and here's what you can do. I'm just happier that way. I like doing that. So if you are an editor out there listening to this, what kind of editor are you? Put it on whatever bio or card or something. Let people know. And if you're not sure, talk to people. Figure it out. There's 3 kinds of editing. You're probably one of them. It's okay. But I'm a developmental editor. I take things all the way apart. And it helps, but it's not everybody enjoys the process all the time. But yeah, I just work at a different level than everybody else. Other editors work at different depths or different amounts or different kinds of work. Great question. That answer was a lot less combative than I thought. When I rehearsed it earlier, I was ready for a fight. I was going to throw down. I must be mellowing. Maybe it's Friday. Question 9. If every sentence is a camera, when do I know that I've written enough about something and I can move on? You just know? it's there isn't a specific thing like to have the light bulb go off. It's not like, oh, you've written 6 words, that's enough. Like it's not that. It's you've written a thing. You've written all right, I'll say it this way. You have written enough about X when you are confident that if a reader read what you wrote, they would understand X to the degree you need them to understand X at this time. They don't need to know everything right now. We're only on like page 5, so we don't need to give them the whole history of everything. But at the same time, you've given them enough that based on what's happening right now, based on what has been happening and what is happening and what's about to happen, they know enough for this moment. If that's the case, you have written enough about whatever X is, and you can then move on. But yes, every sentence is a camera. It's got to be doing some amount of lifting, some amount of describing, some amount of stuff, so that the reader knows what to picture in their brain as they imagine your story playing out. Every sentence is a camera. That sense of, I've written enough, they'll get X now, is a gut feeling that you can learn to trust and learn to strengthen over time. Initially, I can guarantee you this, you're not going to describe enough. That is the most common starter problem. You just have to describe more things. You can describe the plot. You know exactly what you want to say. I need to get 1, 2, 3 things across in order for this scene to work. And that's all you do, and then you move on. But there's so much more, because that scene, that plot critical stuff, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. So where is it taking place? What else does the reader need to picture? What do you want to give them? Like, how should they imagine the space? Is it just like a dark room and then sound happens and there's no visual, or is it an office, a room, a den, a car, a bathroom? What is it? The reader should feel like they're there next to the character or characters as stuff is happening. So if the reader is parked in that room, wherever it is, for whatever this conversation is, what do they see? Because clearly they're going to move their head around. They're going to look and, check the space out. You've got to be able to tell them, hey, here's what you'd see. They're not only going to be focused specifically on the plot. Oh, there's the plot. Everything else is immaterial. No, everything's material to this. Everything matters here. This is important. The idea is that you need to control and you need to steer what they see when they need to see it. And you can always go back and always expand on it more. But by and large, you decide, okay, I've given you enough X for now. Now we're going to move to Y, and maybe we'll go back to X, but I've given you enough for right now. On we move. You make those decisions. You set that up. Not them. Not their rough guesses. You're writing it. They're reading it. Don't forget that. Are there any more questions? We are flying tonight. I apologize. Any more questions, though? Else we will march on to our last 3 questions. Holy shit. All right. On we go. Question 10. How can I explain the difference between... Hang on. Here we go. Can you give a rundown of the different processes that go into traditional versus direct-to-publisher versus self-publisher? The pros and cons and ins and outs. Sure. Let's do that. Okay. Hang on. Ugh. Okay. Different processes that go into traditional versus direct. Okay. Let's go to the main screen for a minute. Let's do it this way. Okay. Let's go here. All right. We're gonna walk through this in pieces. Traditional publishing means you've written the thing. You've written the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 20th, 50th draft. You have polished it to the best of your ability, or had it polished to the best of its ability. And you have written a query letter and synopsis to take along with your manuscript, and you send it out to an agent/pimp. They're a pimp because you've done all the work and they're going to profit off your labor, but that's fine. I know people love that shit. But you're doing all the work and they're walking away with 6 to 12%. And all they did was write an email. But okay, whatever. So you're going to send it off to a pimp and try to get a pimp to really like what you did. And then hopefully you do that. And then that pimp goes, I know exactly who I can whore your work out to. Here is a publisher. And the pimp tries to negotiate for you, but also for them, some amount of money from the publisher to you and them. So they try to like arrange it so they can make maximum money while selling you on this idea of, well, I've also given you access to all these different things. Yeah, sure. But they all have costs, and that means you all have to earn out against them. This isn't free. The pimp is here to profit off your work, and they're going to try and do that to the best of their ability in the most parasitic, exploitative way possible, because otherwise they don't have a job. So they middle person your work for you. They take a cut every time you do something. They cheer you on and say, good job, and then ask when the next thing you're going to write is, because they got bills to pay too, because, you know, they're just eating the food out of your fridge after you went grocery shopping. You know what I'm saying? But that's the traditional process. And all the marketing and all that other stuff, you still have to do that too. But, you know, hey, you're traditionally published. Boy, howdy, isn't that great? Now let's suppose we go the other way for direct to publisher. Well, we cut the pimp out, so that's good. But at the same time, you got to understand a lot of publishers who open up for unsolicited, unagented manuscripts, sometimes there's two factors you need to know. One, it's a much lower bar of entry because they're not looking for agented submissions, so there hasn't been an extra gatekeeper already. So they can expect to see higher volume of submissions, and the quality can more significantly vary because you're seeing more submissions without a gatekeeper. But how this works is you send your manuscript, your query, and your synopsis to the publisher directly. And then they go through and they get directly in touch with you. Hey, here's what we really liked your stuff. It was neat. We're thinking about giving you this much money in this kind of payment schedule for this kind of work. And then you say yes, or you say no. And if you say yes, you sign the paperwork, they start paying you, and then you produce the work on the schedule and it goes out into the world. You still have to market it. You still have to, use your platform. Nobody's going to do that shit for you. There's never any process where all you have to do is sit and write. You are now, the minute you try to publish this in any way, it's a business and it's a job. But you've gone direct to publisher. You're also published. Congratulations. But let's say you don't want to do that. Let's suppose that you wrote this thing and you want total control over it for whatever reason. That's fine. You can self-publish it. But that means, in addition to writing the draft and polishing it and getting into its best shape, although you no longer need a synopsis and a query letter, now you need a cover. Now you're going to need a higher caliber of editing than you did when you were just polishing it yourself, because whatever, it was going to go to a gatekeeper. Now it's going to go directly to the people who can pay you for it. And, that's a thing. And for a lot of people, they just want to lob it out there and let it sit out there and, it'll be fine. It won't be fine. Over 80% of books don't get more than 2 reviews. Like, there's tens of thousands of books produced on the regular that no one notices, no one picks up, that don't get really anywhere. And it becomes an accumulation. You got to write 30, 40, a stack of them before you even get any kind of traction or notice or engagement or something. And it can feel very, very exhausting. At least when you went directly to the publisher or you used a pimp, you at least had something to get some head pats on social media for. But here, self-publishing, you're going to need to pay for that cover. And that's going to run you anywhere from $300 to $1,000 at least. You're going to need an editor, and that's probably going to run you another $400 to $3,000 at least. And you're going to get what you pay for. Plan accordingly. And then you're going to have to possibly pay for printing if you're going to print physical copies and ship them. And shipping will kill you. But maybe you'll just go all digital. Maybe you'll just go all digital, which is totally fine. You're still going to have to market the thing. You're going to have to write sales copy. You're going to have to produce a web page to sell this thing, whether that's a river-themed corporate web page or just your own blog or whatever. You're going to need to sell this thing. I get asked a lot about which one's better. I can tell you that I'm a big fan of any system that directly benefits you to the exclusion of people who profit from exploiting you. I'm not really a big fan of exploitation, maybe you've noticed. But I'll tell you, the best thing you can do is put your work out there in whatever way you want. Do I, immediately think less of you because you went one way or the other? No. Some people want to go that way because they've just had their heart set on it forever, and it's a long, tough road, and it's going to grind you into dust, and I hope you still succeed at the end of it. But whatever way gets your book out in front of the hands of people who will give you money for it seems very legit to me. I hope I answered your question. It's a good question. It's a very good question. But it's never that simple. No, we did 9. We're on 10. How can I explain the difference between young adult and new adult? The old way of thinking was that new adult is young adult plus sex. That is a very dated, very sexist idea. And it's also inaccurate. Think about it this way. Young adult are the people you immediately think of when you think teenager. High school age, somewhere in there, more or less the teenage years, young adult. New adult, think about people sophomore and up in college. They're no longer totally new to the world. They're starting to develop their own sense of self, their own sense of where their feet are in the world. And they're moving past the later stages of teen, 17, 18, 19 can even be new adult depending, and into your early 20s. Now, I don't mean like your protagonist has to be that age. I mean the concept, the stuff underneath. Your book has to appeal to those people, and it has to speak to their issues and speak to their experiences. And it often helps to frame your protagonist of that age so that you have an easy in with your readership, but you don't have to. But the general, other than age, because that's the simplest way to do it, the other thing to talk about is complexity of story. When you were 14, although the world felt so messy and big and felt like everything was right there in front of you, if you look at how the world is when you're 22, it is a far cry from how it was at 14. The world gets differently complex as we scale through age. And as we move from young adult to new adult, the stories inherently get more complex. They get riskier. They get more complicated. Not just in terms of like, oh, well, there's a double cross and 2 flashbacks. But I mean, within the narrative construction of the plot, things can be more difficult. Things can have more weight, more pressure, more risk, more reward, sure, but it can also just be more difficult. You can put somebody in their 20s into a different situation than you could a 15-year-old. Likewise, the other side is also true. 15-year-olds view the world in one particular way, and there's one kind of story that's really very accessible to them. And if you take the same coming-of-age story and try to paste someone in their mid-20s into it, it's going to feel really awkward. But the fundamental difference between YA and NA, other than age, is that as you scale up and age up, things get more complex and more fill in the blank, more risky, more dangerous, more urgent, more emotional, more evocative, more something. That's how you tell the difference between YA and NA, at least in brief. It gets much more complicated if you really want to dive into it. But by and large, the people who were just asking, how do I tell the two apart, a a simple answer like age and complexity will carry you a long way. You'll win all the cocktail party conversations. Age and complexity. Good question. Question 11. How can I make my magic system more interesting? Oof. Okay, so apparently this was the week on social media where people were just all up about their magic system. So let's do some basics on magic systems. The vast majority of them come in two flavors, hard and soft. Hard refers to the crunchiness of it. And you know exactly what magic costs, like how it's performed, and the expense it takes on the doer of magic. And it becomes a battle to maintain a fuel supply or an economy or deal with the performance of magic as a factor in magic. You'll find out that your wizard is powered, has to deal with willpower, and sometimes they're just exhausted. You learn, yes, you do get the really cool effects, but they're almost secondary to the how you get the effect. The act of concentration, the gesturing, the symbols, the ritualization of it all, that is as much a part of it as it is, he says a magic word and the thing happens. In a soft system, the exact particulars of how the magic happens are incredibly almost unnecessary. And a soft magic system is pretty much just dependent on the end result. What we would normally ascribe to like a CG budget in a movie, we just care about how it looks and what it does. A soft magic system is not necessarily one that's mechanically well developed, other than just like, it's the force, and then we do stuff. And then when you try to turn a soft system into a hard system by inventing midichlorians, it feels weird and everybody makes fun of you. Likewise, if you have, just straightforward, they're wizards, they use pointy sticks to shoot magic pew-pew death lasers at people. The how doesn't really matter, because it's more an issue of what are they doing and how do we not get killed. You can make it interesting by first figuring out what kind of magic system you have. Are you focusing on how the magic gets done and what sort of fuel is expended and what kind of toll it exacts? Are the mechanics of the magic interesting? Is that where you want the reader to put their attention and put some focus? Well, then you've got a hard system. And it would behoove you to weave that difficulty and that complexity and that crunch into the rest of your story so that it doesn't feel particularly bolted on. Like, I was telling a story and then all of a sudden I tripped and found this extra box of a magic system and now I've just got to duct tape it to the side. You want to have it more consistently woven through the story. So, one, identify the hardness or softness of your magic. If you've got a soft system, you're not really concerned with the energy or the mana flow or whatever it is you want to call it, right? And you just care about the effect. Points as, shake their pointy stick at something, kaboom, describe it in this really big evocative way, great. To make a hard system more interesting, you've got to engage the reader with the economy of it. The costs, the risks, the danger, the need, the joy, the celebration of success, all that stuff. Make the reader feel like they have a vested interest in the imperfection of it. There's no chance, there's a chance it might fail. There's a chance this could go bad. That risk carries some tension with it, allows the reader to connect to it. For a soft system, we don't really care about risk. We care about who's just able to do the thing first or best. Two wizards shooting pointy stick death rays at each other, it really just comes down to who hits who first. To make a soft system more interesting, you want to describe it with a flourish. Describe it with more supportive detail. To make a hard system more interesting, you want to bring the reader along for the ride across all parts of it. Aside from that, consider that in both hard and soft systems, it isn't, you shouldn't, how do I say this? You should not limit your imagining of it to just what can be done with visual effects. Think about what other sensory like if I shoot a fireball out of my finger, Yeah, there's the ball of fire as it plumes out from my hand, but isn't that also going to like light all the paper on my desk on fire? Isn't that going to burn my eyebrows off or smell really funny because it's just fire rippling its way through the room? What other details can you give to make the magic feel a little less like just flat special effects and more like a practical thing that the world has to engage with? Do that in whatever way you can, and you will make your magic system more interesting. I would also not expect you to get that right in one draft. This is like a multi-draft problem. Do your best. Hard or soft? How is the reader attached to it? What can I describe? That's going to make your magic system more interesting by default. Good question. And now, gentle advice. Question 12. How much of my own life do I draw on to write my book? Remember that question we had about being political? And whether you meant it or not, there was some politics that snuck their way in there. Well, the same is true here. Whether you intend it or not, whether you are being explicitly autobiographical or not, your life is showing up in your work. Your frustrations with, this, that, or the other find their way either by obvious point or omission. You see what you're saying about this or what you're saying about that by what words you choose or what words you avoid. Your views and, anything from nostalgia to envy to pleasure to habit all come across in your work based on how you describe things. You can't really ever get away from your work. And the most... No, we're gonna tweak this a little bit. You can't get away from your work. That's true. For a long time, there was a movement, a want to be completely invisible in your own work. Just produce your work and, use a goofy ass pen name and keep people questioning about who wrote it in this very sort of like the Federalist paper kind of way, or like this unknown and, enigmatic person who just wrote this amazing thing and haha, who knows what the fuck it is. That used to be really popular. That used to be really a thing. Some people still glamorize it because it's anonymous and kind of risky or something. I just think it's stupid. I thought I was dumb back then. It only got dumber with time. You shouldn't run away from your work. You just shouldn't. You shouldn't pretend that you don't feel those things or that you don't like those things. I understand that other people are going to find out that you wrote a book that maybe has kissing in it or something, and they're going to have some issues, but that's on them to sort out. It is not your job to ameliorate their boo-boos because they're all out of sorts because you wrote a thing. That's on them to work out. You don't have to try and like bubble wrap them to make your work okay. This is what you made. It's good. It's not good. You want to keep doing it. You want to give up. That's all on you, not them. In your life. Even though you're never mentioning your, the names of people outright, maybe you are, but, just because you've created this villain and it's sort of an amalgam of all 5 people who were your former employers. Like, you're not necessarily naming them specifically, but you're taking a few traits from them. And if, they want to read into that and go, oh, well, I'm the bad guy in your book. You don't have to answer. You could say no. Or a better thing, oh, I'm really surprised you saw that. I wasn't thinking about that at all. That's really interesting. And then walk away from it. Your life is in your work the same way that your politics is in your work, because your politics is in your life. Even if you wrote the most basic, what used to be called a bathtub book, a book you would give a small baby into a tub that's generally very tactile and very heavy cardboard and very simple. Yeah, your life's still there because you still figured out what you were going to write about. And your fuzzy bunnies and happy puppies were selected because for whatever reason, you have some point to make with puppies and fuzzy bunnies. Maybe that's just because that's what you could draw, or that's what you could afford with your artist, or you have a particular fondness for bunnies and puppies. Who knows? But you're all up and through your work. Why would you want to apologize for that? It's not going to be everybody's cup of tea. It's not going to be the thing everybody runs out for. Some people are going to love it. Some people are going to be on it. Some people are going to be indifferent to it. Some people are going to hate it. You can't control any of that. All you can do is keep producing the work that makes you feel good that you produced the work. So how much of your own life do you draw? As much as you want. Because whether you know it or not, unintentionally, some of your life's getting out there. Whether that's just how you choose to write characters that sound a certain way, or how a particular line is delivered or written, or what sarcasm is used, or what marketing strategy you use, that all speaks to who or what you are. It's unavoidable on that level. That's worth thinking about. That's worth considering. So you're always bringing some baseline amount of you to your work. It's just a matter of, do you want to add to that or not? Hint, you should always be trying to add to it. It's just going to make everything so much better. Yeah, I'm happy with that answer. Are there any other questions, issues, etc. about anything? I will sit here and have another mouthful of water. Any questions about whatever? We've had some great ones about publishing and laying things out. So whatever questions you got, I'm happy to answer. Does entering and hopefully winning writing competitions benefit the author other than just feeling good? Do you mean like in a publishing sense? Like, will a publisher like you better because you won a contest? Or will a pimp like you more because you won a contest? Yeah, some will. I mean, it might make a difference. It might not. Eventually, though, whether you won or not is not as important as how good's the book. The win, whatever it is, alone is not necessarily going to be the deciding factor. Oh, well, I'm on the fence about this book, but they won a contest. Oh, that makes it definite. It doesn't work that way. Yeah, it's really nice to enter them. It's really nice to win. That's delightful. It sucks that you have to pay for these things because that's bullshit. But it can benefit you outside of publishing as well because it can teach you how to write better. It can give you a sense of how to deal with deadlines and how to deal with discipline. It can give you a sense of, writing against adversity with competition or on a reduced scale. So it has definite tangible benefits, and it's a chance to write, and a writer should be embracing all chances to write as best they can. So there's definitely craft benefits to it. In terms of publishing and marketing, there's some benefit to it. All of a sudden you can say, I'm the person who won the so-and-so contest. But beyond that, if you're counting on that win of the contest to be the thing that like a consumer decides to go out and grab, like if you win the Northern Indiana 4-H writing contest, that's probably, it's very nice, good for you, but it's probably not noteworthy enough to mark on, to write down on your Amazon blurb. Because unless your reader who's looking at Amazon suddenly knows, oh my God, they won the Northern Indiana 4-H writing contest. Holy shit. Unless people know that, it's not going to matter. Just like when people mention an award, oh, I won the such and such award. Oh, okay. If they don't have a frame of reference for it, it doesn't ultimately matter. But for you, the writer, yeah, contests are great. They can improve your writing to some degree. They can also wreck your writing. There's always that downside. People get so bottlenecked and log jammed in contests, thinking that it's more than what it is. It's just a contest. It's just a chance to see if some piece of writing on a deadline to a point can stand out. It is not a faster entree into publication. It is not a faster entree to better sales. It's not anything other than you wrote a thing with these parameters, and it was better than other people who wrote a thing with those parameters. But yeah, that's competition. If you want to do it, go to town. If not, that's fine too. Nothing wrong with that. Other questions? All right, I'm going to press this button. It's a different button than the last 3 buttons I've pressed. Just want to see what happens. Nothing. Nothing happened. All right, fair enough. Otherwise, we'll get out of here. We good? All right. Yeah. Let us bounce to the outro. Well, that rocket ship through the last 12 questions was, wow, I'm surprised. We did kind of fly there, and I apologize for that, but it really was really nice to do it. This was a Friday chat. Well, I'll let you know how, if this becomes a regular thing. I don't think it will be. I think we'll be going back to Wednesdays. I just wanted to give it a try and dust it off. But yeah, we'll be back to work next week. I'll tell you right now, the next time I'm here will be Monday the 16th, when I'm covering something I don't know yet. We'll all find out over the weekend. And then the next time I'll be here with the chat will be on Wednesday the 18th for the Writers Chat back on its regular night. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for checking this out. All power to all people. Take good care of yourself. Take care of somebody else. And I will talk to you guys very, very soon. See ya.